welcome to our Technology, Innovation, and Digital Engagement Lab speaker series housed at Union Theological Seminary. I am the proud director of our fellowship program by the same name of title. And we have been holding these conversations since the summer of this year. We have really found it so critical and so important to gather like-minded folks to have conversations about what it looks like to embrace technology, what it looks like to embrace innovation in our own sector, the broad tent of faith-based work. It can be very broad, and sometimes we're all doing different things, but it's always so wonderful to gather together. And I'm so thrilled that Bill is here, 50 miles west of Toronto. So I could say today we're not only gathered in one portion of North America, but we've got several portions of North America represented tonight. So that's exciting. Let me do the honors of introducing our speaker today. Cassandra Louie has been with us at Title for a session with just our fellows about a month ago. And we just said, you know what, it's too good to keep to ourselves. We got to make an opportunity available to our audience who enjoys receiving information about technology and innovation in varying ways to be intentional about that work. So I'm so excited to welcome Cassandra with us, and I see another fellow has joined on. Marvin is here. Marvin is another title fellow, so good to see you as well. And so I want to just give you all Cassandra's bio. I want to frame a little bit of the why we thought this conversation would be so important to have, not only for those who are within our fellowship, but those who are in our community. And then I'm going to turn it over to Cassandra, because the other speaker events have been conversation series where I have been sitting doing fireside chats with our guests. And while I love that format, tonight we're trying a different format where we really are going to just sit at the feet, metaphorically, of Cassandra and just learn from her. And she will share in more of a presentation style than a conversation, fireside conversation style. So with that, let me go ahead and introduce her. Cassandra Louie is at New York University, where she serves in numerous roles. NYU is one of my alma maters, so whoop whoop to NYU. Cassandra's primary job is working on process improvement initiatives impacting the global institution. Additionally, she is the chair of the Administrative Management Council, the organized body representing all administrative employees worldwide. She also holds a student-facing role as an adjunct faculty member at the NYU Tandon School of Engineering, where she teaches project management. As a lifetime learner, she plans to soon return to the NYU School of Professional Studies, where she will complete her studies as an MS candidate in the Coaching and Organizational Consulting program. Prior to NYU, Cassandra was the operations director and process improvement lead at John F. Kennedy International Airport. Shout out to New York, all the New Yorkers, make some noise, whoop, whoop, whoop. I am partisan to LaGuardia, but JFK is cool too. But LaGuardia is closer to my house, okay. But she was there, and before earning her wings, she was an operations director and Lean Six Sigma portfolio manager for the U.S. Postal Service. When not at work, Cassandra stays busy as a facilitator for her son, Cameron, now an 11-year-old middle schooler. Together, they are active in the Boy Scouts of America at Troop 253 in Queens. Do I have anybody from Queens in the building? Make some noise. I used to serve a church in Queens, so I'm honorary Queens a little bit, I think I like to say. And so Cassandra is a volunteer with Troop 253 in her spare time. I don't know where the spare time comes from, because, she wears many hats, but in her spare time, Cassandra supports education in other ways. She is an advocate for early education, serving as vice president for the New York City Department of Education Community Education Council, and as a board member for the Courtney Lou Charter School. So can we just put some emojis or some welcomes in the chat? Because we are thrilled to have Cassandra with us. And I just want to say this by way of framing, and then I'm going to turn the floor over to her. We named this Innovation is a Process. And the reason why I named tonight's talk "Innovation is a Process" is because so often when we think about innovation, we get really excited about the bells and whistles of innovation, and we think there's this moment where folks had this aha moment in a brainstorming session, and this amazing idea came down from above, and everything flowed smoothly, and nothing was ever the same. And like Disney fairy tales, we lived happily ever after, right? And the reality is, a lot of times we have these aha moments, we have these moments of brilliance. We sit together in conversations and sessions, and we have this, oh my gosh, it would be amazing if moment, right? And then oftentimes we wonder why those ideas don't always match the passion, the energy, or the clarity of the brainstorm. Oftentimes, the kind of divvying up of who's going to do what to make it possible. Oftentimes, after the glossiness of the new idea rolls off, the mundane elements of now let's get this done happen. And more often than not, these brilliant ideas don't get to live in the world for very long. And I would offer that that's because we often pay more attention to creating the idea and not enough attention to cultivating the idea. And that is where process comes in, and in particular process management. And so tonight is a night where I welcome you to have your notes handy. Cassandra is a very interactive facilitator, so please, you're going to want to be listening so you don't miss your opportunity to have some direct correspondence with her. But this is the night for those who are tired of having a million ideas on a whiteboard that never come to pass, right? This is the night where I think the tools and skill sets you will gain will help you get from idea to actualization. So without further ado, let us welcome Cassandra Louie to lead us for our time tonight.
Hi there. Good evening, everyone. I see you all from places that I have been to and loved, from the south all the way to the north. So welcome and thanks so much for joining me. I just need to see a thumbs up to make sure I am coming in clearly. Little sound check. Fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I am on 2 devices tonight, so I can see the feedback in the chat as well. So you let me know when things are good for you, because I'm just about going up for me. Let me know if you see my screen. So far, so good, right? Dr. Gabby, do you hear that little bit of audio?
I do. Give me one moment. I'm going to mute everyone, and then I will unmute you.
Their conflict with Israel from the war in Gaza, which is
Okay. Are you able now to unmute, Cassandra? Do you need me to ask you to unmute? I think I need to ask you because I'm
I'm good.
You're good. Okay.
That just worked. Hello, everyone. Hello there. So I
Hello.
hope that you can see my screen. And I'm so glad there's so much violet out there. For those of you that are not NYU associated, after tonight, you will be. So I look forward to you joining the violet force. But no matter where you come from or what you do, I hope that what we chat about today inspires you to think about, how can I use some of this framework, some of these ideas in the thing that I do. Spoiler, you will need your cell phone at some point in today's session. So if it's not available, go ahead and scoop it up. So Dr. Gabby, thanks for talking to us about innovation is a process. And it sure is, right? You don't go from 0 to 100 in technology overnight. And project management is how we help get down that path. But project management is actually really just teamwork. And we're going to explore that in just a few minutes together. So this is my bio. If you ever need to find me, you can do it at cal10@nyu.edu. For those of you that don't know that background, that's on campus. And that is right across the street from Washington Square Park. So these are the things that I do. I just dabble a little bit here and there. I like to think that like every practitioner, we're just practicing, waiting to get it better and better each time. So if you need anything or would like to chat anytime, cal10@nyu.edu. And let's talk a little bit. Let's just kind of think out loud. Let's use our chat to just think about if I had to start creating a word about project management. What are some of the words that come to mind? I'm sorry, what was that, Pastor Samuel?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So go ahead and drop in the chat some of the words that come to mind to you when we start dialoguing about project management. Anyone out there say design? Design comes to my mind. Maybe goals or tools. I like it. Teams and process, right? Some folks say planning is the first. For me, metrics, I love it. Organization, absolutely. Sometimes, again, kind of teamwork is out there, right? Approaches, collaboration. Thank you, Mimi. I see you. Sometimes we think that we'd like to put something into place so we can have some control. Maybe we need some framework. I like that. Concept to execution, scope, strategy, reports. Absolutely. All of these words are connected to project management or some phase or some function in project management. And sometimes our word cloud ends up looking something like this, right? To say to yourself, okay, yeah, I can totally get with that. Many of what I was thinking, many of those words are finding their way in this word cloud. And so it is indeed all of these things coming to life. And we have to think about that. We can't go on forever. So let's talk about what is a project, right? Folks use that word all the time. I got a project I'm working on. But in essence, if we kind of boil it down to this basic premise, it's a temporary effort. And we engage in it to create something that is unique. It might be a product, a service, or a result. And when we think about projects, we look at them having some set of attributes. They're temporary. They result in something unique. I saw scope in there in our word cloud. Thank you. I think that was you, Mimi. They have a beginning and an ending, and that's specific. Sometimes they've got some other kind of gateway things that happen in the middle between the beginning and the end, but they have a concrete deadline. They're giving us a specific set of deliverables. We are out there solving a problem or achieving a goal. And all of this is very, very common in what we see when we look at what is a project. And when we think about some of the things that are part of our great challenge of being successful in this way, we take a look and see that we find that sometimes scope and dates, right, kind of live at the very top of the things that are challenging. Let's take a look at the whys that are. When we think about projects, why do we embark on them at all to begin with, right? My organization or my business has a problem. Maybe they have an opportunity. Problems are kind of easier to identify, right? Sometimes a thing is broken. Well, that's pretty straightforward. It used to work really well. It doesn't work anymore. Broken. Out of compliance, there was some rule, policy, regulation that we are about to fall out of compliance. And we've got to do something about it. Our process might be dated, inefficient, or inaccurate. Decently straightforward. Sometimes opportunity is a little bit more effort to identify those, right? Maybe we want to engage in a new line of work, maybe a new location, maybe we want to create an innovation. This is a very kind of simple pictorial when we look at technology. We've got a legacy system. We have to update it with some features and functions. And in the end, we're going to be able to do the thing or access that data much faster. And these are all real experiences that we all, I think, have had when we embarked on a project. We either created it, we were volunteered because we loved it. I volunteered. Sometimes we were voluntold because we have some set of skills that are significant to progress. But when we look at project work, and I want to kind of think through this for a second, because many of the words that you're about to see resonated with you right away. Project work has to do with scope, has to do with plan, has to do with the budget. Of these three things, by the way, which resonates to you as the most challenging to kind of keep the reins in on as our projects evolve? Was it the scope? The, oh my goodness, all the things that we are trying to do together? We've got this great problem. Let's rein it in so we can solve it. Is it the plan of it, just kind of staying on track to do what we want to do? Is it the budget, right? Nobody here is fortunate enough to have a blank check. And the reason that they are so challenging, right? I see a lot of ones for scope. I see some budgets out there. Is that it's so common in project behavior that we are iterating. And essentially, common project behavior is progressive elaboration. It means that we're going to iterate each time that we engage in a dialogue. It means that details of our plans and the information that we are gathering is pushing us for more. So that means the scope might want to grow a little bit. The plan might get expanded a little bit, or at least it feels like it wants to. And our budget is pushing and pushing as the iterative process brings great ideas for us and new insights to us, but challenges us a little bit, right? To just kind of rein it in, just make sure we are accomplishing what we want to accomplish, right? Sometimes tough, but always that challenge takes us to that next place. And project work, again, iterative, small little changes as we go along. But ultimately, we get to the end of it. Some of the deliverables that we were talking about. We've met our goals, our stakeholders and our customers are happy and they accept the great things that we've accomplished together. Some of the artifacts of what we will provide when our project comes to an end. Some library of records. Maybe what you did was so fabulous that someone else, somewhere else in your organization may want to replicate it. That is the ultimate in commendation to the significance of what you've done. Maybe the process was so innovative, the product was so well received. We want to do it again. And so the library of records becomes really significant in allowing a team after us to continue and do it all over to replicate or expand. We'll also dust ourselves off. We probably learned some lessons. That iterative process meant that some things worked really well. We kept them and we built on them. And some things weren't our greatest success story and they sunset. And we should talk about that in the closing process of lessons learned. Our final report and presentation wraps up the entire initiative so that we can say, well, we're done. We're going to celebrate. The project has closed. And that seems like really great, right? That's awesome. We all do it. Life is full of projects. It's full of these temporary endeavors to give us something that's unique. And so give a little heart in your box if any of these come to you as a project of your life. Maybe you planned a vacation. That's a project. Ever tried to plan a family vacation, by the way, like family reunion? That is the ultimate in vacation planning, family management strategies is a family reunion, but a project, right? Vacationing. Ever been in the middle of a construction project? Maybe renovating your house, maybe renovating a portion of your house, a kitchen, a bathroom. Maybe you didn't do something that elaborate, but have you ever bought a piece of Swedish furniture and had to put that together? That, friends, that's a project. Or maybe you are pursuing a certificate program or a degree. Think about all of these types of projects. And where did it begin to push the scope? Push your plan. Or, to that point in the chat, push your budget. Right? Happens all the time. All the time. Ever go on a cruise vacation? Anyone ever give me a thumbs up for cruise vacations? And everyone around says, oh, a cruise vacation. Everything's included. My drinks, my food, all that's included. And then you say to yourself, when you're on this cruise vacation, I want to go at this port and go on this excursion. I'd like to pet the monkeys. I want to ride a horse. I would like to be in the sushi making class. And all of a sudden, there goes that budget. But still, a really fun project, right? So all of these are projects. They happen every day in our lives. And life is really project management. You are your own project manager. But let's talk about a few projects in technology, right? We're all here because we are thinking about how technology, innovation, progress happens and impacts us. So I'd like you to invite you to scan the QR code, and I'm going to take you to a little article written a few years back, but I think it's pertinent to us today. It is an article from the Project Management Institute listing the top 10 most influential projects in technology. And let me know when you've had a chance to start thumbing through some of these items that the Project Management Institute says these right here are the top 10 most influential projects in technology. And let me know around the room when you've captured it. Little heart emoji or something in your box, a little thumbs up when you have captured that PMI link to the most influential projects in technology. Thank you for the link. And as we think about these items, right, it's the World Wide Web. Where would we be today without the World Wide Web? It is Intel 4004, which was actually the revolutionary microprocessor early on that started this dialogue about computing power. It is number 3. It's the world's first commercial cell phone. Does anyone remember that? What that looked like when that hit our lifestyle? The thing was probably the size of a suitcase, like a carry-on. Huge. Number 4, Google search. Number 5, the iPod. Number 6, IBM's Watson, who beat a human champion, by the way, in Jeopardy. Number 7, which I can't say because it will make something happen in my household, Alexa. Number 8 is the barcode. 9 is Skype, which revolutionized communication. And number 10 is Facebook. So as you kind of think about these items and, you know, these 10, what PMI says are the 10 most influential projects in technology, how many of them do you think impact your life each day? A few? Maybe 2, 3? Some? 3 of them? Possibly 4? Most? Is it most? For me, it's most. Anyone around the room? Most. I see you, Pamela. I see you, Alicia. Most. Thank you. Most. Anyone out there say no? I just few, like maybe 2 tops. If you touched your cell phone today, several of the top 10 most are impacting your life today. It's pretty amazing, right? Just like that. Absolutely, Mimi. In later iterations, you're 100% right. Many of us would not be in our body of works without those really early on innovations. And we certainly would not be here today if it wasn't for, in this room, by the way, we'd not be in this room without the web, without that processor, and without Skype. Folks argue that Skype is the origin of how we convene in a group online. So just kind of thoughts about that. So the top 10, really interesting dialogue. PMI, the Project Management Institute, also has some great links connected to that page about influential projects in each sector. So some light reading in case you're ever curious. But when we think about projects, right, these attributes, these things, these temporary initiatives to create something, they're limited, they're specific in time, they've got some real deliverables to achieve a goal and solve a problem. But how many of those tasks need a juggler? Well, I mean, at the very least, for me, these 3, we talked about them. But eventually, they all kind of need a master of ceremonies, and that's where project management comes in. Project management helps us plan, organize, and manage all of those resources, all the resources that are necessary to make this goal come to life, to deliver this outcome, to solve this problem. Project management is also the practice of applying some set of skills, some tools, some knowledge, maybe processes that we've come to hone and refine over time so that we achieve this goal, execute this deliverable, complete this project. Project management, though, can't be one individual. Project management is about facilitating a team and managing all of those things that happen, the team, the resources, the time, and to make sure that we make progress. So when we think about that, right, who is ensuring the success of a project? Does anyone ever work with a project manager or said to yourself, this is me right here? Answer the phone, water the plant, check the grass, look at the calendar, turn on the lights, write some notes, check the reports. Oh, by the way, what time is it? At some point, I think we all kind of felt like this. So a project manager, if we think about it, plans, executes, and closes projects, and they work really closely with stakeholders. Stakeholders are any individual party or organization that is impacted by our project. And Marvin says, I have definitely served as a project manager without the title. You most certainly have. I guarantee you have. And as we go through this dialogue together, I'm going to challenge all of us to say, oh my goodness, I have definitely been this, both in my professional life as well as in other aspects of my life that are not defined solely by my paycheck, right? Let's kind of think about that, right? If a project manager plans, executes, and closes a project, they plan a thing, they plan for some goal, they execute and help execute all of those tasks to reach that goal, and then they close it. Think about a holiday dinner. Think about planning a party for a loved one. You are project manager. And factors for success of our project manager, that's right. Your favorite auntie is a project manager. You know who else is a project manager? Grandparents. Grandparents, certainly. Factors of success. Know how and when to use tools and techniques. Have some knowledge of the project and how does it align with the organization that it's occurring in. Project managers also help to lead change. Oftentimes requires a strong business acumen. And that may not necessarily be conventionally defined as the business. It's the ecosystem that we're existing in. How do we want to be successful in this ecosystem? And of course, every project manager worth their muster has really strong soft skills. It's that dialogue of how do I get these folks all around the table to march to the same beat, to do the thing that they're going to do for the greater sum, right? Super nuanced work. Every person is built a little different. So when we take a look at some traits of some pretty effective project managers, yes, Sherwin, that is absolutely a challenge. I'm going to open the window a second. I apologize. Sherwin says the challenge, right, is those finely nuanced attributes, those folks, the people, the little differences. And our most effective project managers, or common traits of effective project managers, we always look at them as strategic partners. We need to. Effective project managers, oftentimes you will hear them encouraging people or recognizing contributions, right? They are respectful and they motivate. They are vested in success. We want to know that they are working with integrity and accountability, not just for their own actions, but for the actions of those around them. And one of the hardest things about project managers is sometimes we work in ambiguity. We don't always know the path, where the path ahead is going to take us. So we have to have confidence in the process. A little bit of ambiguity is going to be okay because we're going to help solve this problem. And so what we want to do as project managers is help to get the job done. That dart in that bullseye wasn't thrown by the project manager. It was thrown by the team. And the project manager helps to get that dart in the bullseye. They don't actually throw the dart. So when we talk about, well, what are some of the skills that folks will demonstrate? Think about these skills of an effective project manager, things that they need to be good at. Those skills are in your mirror right now. The ability to communicate and talk to people, the ability to lead initiatives, others, movements, efforts. How best to manage time and risk. It might be problem solving, creative problem solving, adaptability, negotiation, and organization. I see the ability to listen. Absolutely. Communication, right, Alicia? 2 ways. That's a 2-way street, right? It is speaking and listening. Absolutely. Motivation, most certainly, right? Motivation and leadership, I feel like closely related. I hear you, Sherwin, not exactly the same things. You're 100% right. What are some of the other things that you say to yourself? I have either been a project manager and here's the skill I leaned on or sharpened the most, or I have been in the company of a great leader who was my project manager, and here's the skill that they demonstrated. I had a project, I was actually on a team, and one of the greatest attributes of a project manager that I was with was compassion, sympathy, empathy, compassion. And I struggle whether or not to put that on this list. But sympathy, empathy, compassion, especially kind of in this day and age in the world around us. But I feel like it might be time for a meaningful edit. So some of the skills that you've seen in a project manager, an effective one, even if it's in the mirror, drop that in the chat. Delegate. Oh my goodness. Marvin, are you a sports fan at all? American football? Anyone out there? American football? Anyone's game?
College football for sure.
College football. Is that you, Marvin?
Yeah, it is.
All right. College football. I love a good college football story, right? Bill Belichick is actually a coach that I've followed for many years. Not just because I actually followed Belichick when he was with the Giants, but Belichick says in a memoir, do your job. And if you do your job and everyone around adopts that concept of, I will focus on doing my job. That is, Sage, to your point, seeing people's strengths. Belichick was one of the most prolific, most hardened head coaches, but he encouraged you when you demonstrated you can try and accomplish. And he even lifted you up when you couldn't, because he says, on game day, if we all agree we're going to do our job and be more concerned about doing your own job, you don't need to worry about everyone else doing their job, because they're going to do that. That's part of our agreement. And if we can all do that, we're going to be great at what we do. That's quite a concept. And so the New England Patriots go on to become one of the most successful franchise sporting teams in the history of professional football. But Belichick, in his kind of root, is a project manager. He doesn't carry the football. He doesn't score the touchdown. He facilitates all of us in doing that. He sees people's strengths and he helps to lift them up. To some degree, Belichick is also all of these things, right? He's very transparent. He will tell you whether or not you are meeting that kind of line in the sand for performance. He certainly, to Marvin, and this is how this all started for me, he delegates. Again, doesn't actually carry the football, throw the football. He finds the right person to do that thing. And so in the end, in my universe, right, because I'm a project managing geek, he's a great project manager. And so we looked at this diagram before, this kind of picture, right? Where project manager seems to like have their hand in everything, doing everything. But what if I offered you this image? Project manager, right? That conductor is a project manager, not actually playing the oboe, not actually playing the violin, but coordinating all of those folks to do that. Sure, when I hear you, that dialogue about volunteer environments, I struggle with that too. I am the chair of the Administrative Management Council at NYU. We are an organized body that represents and elevates employee concerned professional and personal development across the entire NYU universe. It's vast and it is diverse. And every one of those leaders is a volunteer. How do you tap the discretionary efforts of others? That is a whole different skill set. And you're right, Gabby, in faith-based organizations like mission-based work, we rely so deeply on volunteers. And someone pointed out earlier about finding people's strengths. And in volunteer work, there's another layer of that, right? Like, I may be strong in a thing, but that may not be the body of work I came here to volunteer at with to move forward. Another layer, right, of how to go ahead and get folks all marching to the same beat towards the same goal, right? Project management in volunteer faith-based work and mission-driven work is a very important skill set, how to motivate, manage others to move that needle forward in a faith-based, mission-based organization. And so, someone said it out there. It is communication. Step one, what are we doing here together? Getting the right information to the right people in the right place at the right time, using the right channel. And I think this is pertinent specifically now in this world where the circumstances can be so dynamic that communication is really critical. And then the how do we get that message out? Some people don't ever, I deal with students sometimes, I have students, students never read email. They would read a text message before they would read an email. If we have to close down on-campus experience because of weather, emailing them is like the fifth thing that I think we would do. I would G-chat them instantly and they would get it, right? It's the right information, it's the right people, but an email to them is not pertinent. The channel of choice is text messaging. And so that's kind of the very first cardinal rule of how do we all be effective project managers, leaders, and managing people, effective communication. We dabbled a little bit in design thinking. How many of you out there kind of familiar with this? Give me a thumbs up out there or send me a yes in the chat. Design thinking. It's a process for solving problems where we, thank you, Marvin, that we start with prioritizing customer needs and delivering products, services, and outcomes that are desirable, that are economically feasible, and they're technologically feasible for our customer base. It all starts with defining the problem, gotta understand the needs and goals. Listen, somebody out there gave me a listen earlier, right? Communication, talking and listening. Sometimes it's not always listening though, right? Sometimes it is acknowledging something that you've added to the conversation, right? Because we're doing that in chat right now. I'm not actually listening to some of these contributions. Sherwin gives me a thumbs up. Marvin gives us an absolutely about design thinking. Regina agrees. That's absorbing, listening, just absorbing the how folks are giving us feedback, empathy. And this is kind of where I think that, you know, at least my students of this generation need a little bit more grace so they can find their path to empathy. One of the key things that we see most often in design thinking is that what we want to do is we want to promote ideation. Ideation, right? The creation of one idea after another, right? That dialoguing brings greater creativity and solution making. Sounds a little bit like the iterative process, right? It comes from brainstorming. All of these great, wild ideas, notions that seem so far-fetched, but brainstorming will help us get there. Ideation and iteration helps us get it across the finish line. And again, design thinking, just like project management, we're here to solve a problem or achieve a goal. Some other things that I think were super critical to me as we approach design thinking and incorporating that into project management is the notion that design thinking is definitely focusing on gathering information from the users. The same thing we talk about when we say defining customer needs or identifying the problem is really the idea that this is not just the gathering of information. The idea that being empathetic means not only did I hear my customer talking, but I know what it means. I know what they're struggling with. I can feel for them to the extent that we can begin to solve for it, right? That's a slightly different set of accomplishments. Very, very critical in design thinking. But when we look at project management and design thinking side by side, not exactly the same, but somewhat similar. Now we're seeing connections between project management and design thinking. Now, with all of this, you say to yourself, I have definitely done this. I have definitely engaged in this. I have either been the project manager, I have been on a project team that solves for a problem or takes advantage of a situation to create an opportunity. I've created something unique or new. Or maybe I was the customer. You were solving for me. You were giving me something new. And so project management and design thinking overlap and support each other pretty well. If this is the project manager juggling all of these things, they are all resources. So project managers really also juggling resources. So resource management is our process to plan, allocate, and monitor all of the resources used and to make sure that they are used effectively. Effectively also means at the right time, by the right people, for the right purpose, effectively. It's planning, it is estimating, sometimes it's acquiring because we don't have it yet. How do I get a hold of that thing? Sometimes it means developing our team so that they can do it, right? That dialogue of teach a person to fish. Once we've developed that team, we will manage that team and control those resources. I like this. I'm going to pause here for a moment because I need to just make this a little bit bigger. This is Sherwin. Different stakeholders may not have the same agenda. In fact, some stakeholders may have self-preservation agenda that conflicts with the mission of the organization. I like this. I'm going to pause here for a minute. And Sherwin, I'm going to talk through some of my experiences. And if you can jump in and talk through some of yours or anyone else on this call to say, you know what? I 100% agree. And I'll give you an example. I used to work at JFK. And JFK has lots of organizations, right? But a really easy one for all of us to identify, TSA, the Transportation Safety Administration. They're responsible to make sure, among other things, that every passenger approaches, presents, and gets into an airport to board an aircraft so that what they bring on board doesn't pose a risk to anyone. One argues, years ago, right after 9/11, somebody said I brought my toothbrush on my carry-on and they took it away. One argues that the process to ensure that every single passenger is bringing on board what they need to take with them, but does not cross that line to pose a safety risk to those around them. So, some of the most interesting things that I've seen on the TSA line, no order here, clothing steamer. Pretty basic, right? Like you might need that when you are on a trip to press, to steam out your clothes. NutriBullet blender. Sewing machine handheld. I mean, these things, you need them. I found someone's protein powder mix. Well, protein powder, when it's in a box and it's labeled and it's sealed, protein powder. not so much egregious. But when you put it in a Ziploc bag and you put it right next to your cell phone, it could look like an explosive when it goes through the machines. Really, really time sensitive, but so deep in the process to kind of unpack all of that stuff that Cassandra decides to bring on board because she needed a protein shake for breakfast. And we struggle now, right? And in that way, the needs of the customers at large to get through that checkpoint quickly is not the same as the needs of the TSA to make sure that we are doing what we are doing with the depth and the comprehensive nature that is necessary to ensure our safety, both to the mission of getting across that finish line to get on that plane, but sometimes in direct conflict. And so resolving that can seem kind of difficult. In a mission-based environment, I also volunteer for the Boy Scouts of America. The organization has quite a peppered past. And the Scouts and Boy Scouts of America today, especially in the inner city in New York City, those families want those Scouts to be there, boys and girls, so that they can experience a life outside of the city. That's, camping and outdoor activities, community service. But that becomes a little challenging, right? Taking on sponsors is a peppered choice too. So we struggle with that, right? Kind of mission based. So if my Boy Scouts troop got an offer for a sponsorship to take the Scouts on a trip outdoorsing, but it's from an organization that has had some difficult public relations and child security safety, I can't take that. I would love to. I would love for that to happen. But it turns out that we really kind of can't, because we've got to preserve for the greater good, right? So when two things kind of clash. Pamela, thank you for joining us. See you on another occasion. Today's slides will be available for you to reference, and I'm sure the recording. Have a great night, Pamela. So Sherwin, anything in your life kind of check those boxes? Like, yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking and hearing and seeing.
Yeah, I just wanted to first and foremost thank you for this resource on today. Um, I I work in, and we've traversed a lot of the same ground. I also worked at the Port Authority for some time in the past, and currently, and I also pastored a few churches as well. But currently, I just took on a new adventure, which is the president of the PTA at my son's high school. And I got to tell you, in less than 2 weeks, if not longer, I'm totally frustrated already.
Okay.
I'll say this. We had an election the end of August. The first meeting after the election, the co-president indicated that she has some health issues and will not be able to participate for the next couple of months. The next meeting following that, which wasn't even a month after, the secretary realized that she overcommitted and therefore she had to resign. The principal has failed to even do what I call the basics in terms of providing all of the information and the transfer of information from the past board to the current board. So it's just, you can't even, it feels like you can't even get the project off the ground because all of the deliverables that were supposed to be in place to allow you to move forward, nothing has been done. And I think the last thing I want to point out is about the whole concept of overcommitment. I think technology sometimes causes us to believe that we can actually do more than we can. And so we sometimes overcommit and can't necessarily fulfill our responsibilities. So I'd like to hear what your thoughts are about some of those issues.
Oh my goodness, you are tapping on a silo of my world that oftentimes brings me great joy. To your point, though, as an adult volunteer in education in the public school system, does bring me a decent measure of frustration. I have been on the PTA. I am serving now on the Community Education Council, where we strive to find greater greatness in the sum of our parts of all PTAs and adult volunteers in the public school system. So let's take a step back. We would love to be able to benefit from both the foundation as well as the lessons of the people that came before us. And to your point, there should be resources, right? Like there should be some artifacts, some notions, some evidence, some documents, some leads that you engaged in this institution before I came along, right? Is there a constant? Is the constant the school leaders, right? The folks that are elected to do the things, or appointed rather. The principal, the assistant principals, maybe there's a dean of students that can help us weave together the legacy of those parts, right? Absolutely. Some schools are super fortunate and have a family, like a parent advocate, a family administrator, someone of that kind of role, binding the community together under the umbrella of the school. If that coordinator, the parent coordinator role is not filled, did you say it was a high school, Sherwin? Are you muted? I'm going to pause. If it is a high
I'm
school.
sorry. Yes, it is a high school. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It is
New
a high
York
school.
City?
Yes, New York City.
New York City. Okay. Every single borough has a coalition responsible to collaborate efforts across all of high schools in that district. There may be as few as 4, there may be as many as 12. I think the biggest high school collaboration is 12 discrete bodies, buildings in the high school system. There is a council for high schools in New York City to help you go ahead and do that. If you don't have a foundation at your high school, and I would unfortunately say that there are, then in my view, in the absence of structure is opportunity. I would love to be able to take what you had, we can all agree on its strengths, keep them and iterate over the weaknesses. I would love to do that. But when we can't, that means in the absence of structure is opportunity. Now, Sherwin, it can be anything we want. So, I'm sorry, say that again?
No, I agree with you. I mean, but one of the things that I've done in order to try to take advantage of the opportunity as you prescribed is when the board was elected, I sent out to each and every person to try to create a structure, Robert Rules of Order, and how a meeting ought to be carried out. Assuming that you had each and every one of the officers in place. Unfortunately, again, I think without what I would call the leadership at the principal level, you really can't begin to create even a new structure, because you need to have certain things in place. And I mentioned in the chat, for example, no minutes from the prior meeting,
Okay.
no transfer of bank records. The parent coordinator quit at the end of last year. So
Okay.
there is no history on which to go back on and to be able to say, okay, this is where we're coming from and this is where we're going.
Okay. So here's kind of what my opinion would be, right? If I came in and I was your co-pilot, first, and not because this is content that we're on right now, let's figure out the resources and identify the resources we have. If it's a short list, it's quick to make. That's okay. Then let's figure out what we need. not that is in the mirror. Sherwin already knows what's in the mirror. But what do we need bare bones to be successful? Our priority 1 resources, followed by our priority 2 resources. I would do a quick dive into what are the other structures in high schools in my silo, right? And I would definitely lean on the Council for High Schools in your district. If you want to connect with me offline, it's cal10@nyu.edu. I'm glad to have my 2 worlds collide here, and we can talk about that. The Council for High Schools will be able to provide you at least a minimum expected structure for success. And then they may even be able to assist you with kind of levying some support from the superintendent of high schools. That gentle dialogue of, hey, high school principal, here are the things that would be really helpful for your community to be successful. And I look forward to you volunteering, or at some point they can be voluntold. So, Sherwin, let's connect offline because this is a really great conversation. And let's talk about those details. But then here's the content that hits us all, right? Sherwin can't do this alone. Sherwin needs help. Sherwin needs others, right? And in any initiative, it would be this, right, Sherwin? You would have some set of budget, some equipment, some materials, maybe, I don't know what they are, and I don't know where they are. But I also need people. I need some organization of skills, to the point that you made, some knowledge of what you did before. How do we do this, even if we were not as successful as we wanted it to be? And that's the hardest part. So now let's talk about this thing right here. Human capital and people resources. Sherwin, you've got a really specific hurdle to overcome. And part of that hurdle, to a point made in the chat, was about volunteers. Because no one in that organization is going to be paid. That's a labor of love, right? Like, that's kind of where we're headed. We're like, all right, guys, here are all the things that our students need for success. How do I collect a bunch of folks to volunteer their work, their effort? Sometimes I reference it as give a damnedness, right? Like, how do I elevate that for you? How do I elevate this part where you're going to care about it? Because people are going to be at the heart of that success, and managing them, which includes kind of soliciting and sustaining them, right, are the hard part. And we're talking about volunteers, right? How do we find them? Where are they hiding? What's the recruitment strategy? Where do we get these people? Right? Managing them is hard. Finding them, right? That gateway to make connections with them in our faith-based, mission-based, and volunteer-centric organizations and missions are hard. And so a really prolific friend of mine who said to me, affinity is where we begin in mission-based and volunteer organizations. This collaboration that we're in, maybe it's a school, maybe it's a religious organization, has a series of goals and a mission. And if you're here, you are connected to that mission or those goals somehow. So how do we figure that out? How do I find out what your connection is? And begin to say, well, your connection and my connection, independently, somewhat strong, but actually kind of weak. But if my connection and my affinity teams up with your connection and your affinity, and we get a third person, and that person gets a person, and now we all get a person, all of a sudden we are lots of persons, somewhat loosely connected, right? Like we're all not 100% going towards the bullseye, but we're all somewhere on the target. And now we can have a dialogue. And I want to pause here because we've had some activity in the chat about volunteers, human capital, and people resources. And when we talk about volunteers, that's a different layer of recruitment, a different layer of management, of encouragement. How do we sustain that? Has anyone out there had a success story about finding volunteers? About creating a buzz, getting people drawn in to say, huh, wonder what you guys are up to over there. Come a little closer. Check us out a little more. Anyone out there have some success? I will share with you a little success that I had at NYU. So, volunteerism, hard to come by sometimes. At NYU, we are a mission-based organization. Higher education is not the greatest pay out there. We do it because we are dedicated to the mission. But then on top of that, our Administrative Management Council needs volunteers to move the work ahead. And so part of how we find people and then keep them engaged is we often appeal to them to ask them, what's the most important thing that you would like us as an organized body to chase after and pursue this year? And we can't give you everything under the sun, but we give you a choice of 6 things. 6 things that were brought to our attention through our crowdsourcing platform online. We get normally like 15 or 20 a year, and I pop 5 in a survey. And of the 5, the next meeting around, I say, these are the top 3. These are the top 3 things that our community seeks to engage in. And here are some of the ways that these initiatives have come to life in organizations just like ours. And if you'd like to figure out how that will come to life here, scan the QR code, fill out this survey, tell me who you are, and I'm going to find you and connect with you. Because now I've hit the funny bone. Oh, hold on a second. Of those 5 things, yes, I see why those 3 that are most popular are. And of those 3, there's one in there that speaks to me, right? So finding that connection and building that affinity has been really successful. As a result, the Administrative Management Council, the AMC at NYU, I'm going into my 2nd year as the chair. We have increased our active member engagement by way of registration and event attendance, 30%, 36 or 7% over last year. It is something that we are really proud of. And of those 30%, there's 36%. A little over 20 of them have come to more than one event. And of those, I think 6 or 7% have raised their hand to become a leader in an initiative. And so when we dive into those data points, right, it fuels that dialogue of find where we can make a connection as an organized body to the majority of people out there. And then let them choose. What do we focus on? If we have to focus the lens of the picture, what are the things that mean the most to them? And then give each person an opportunity to jump in and control the destiny of where we go together. And so if 5% or 6% of the population wants to say, yes, that thing interests me, and yes, I'll lead an initiative, that's where we're going. That's what we want. We want folks to say, I want to lead my peers. And so you know, those of us out there on this call that have found ourselves leading volunteers or trying to find some, drop some in the chat. What's been successful to you? What has helped you recruit members, turn interest into leadership and volunteerism? What's worked out there? Giving away soda can cozies didn't do it for me. Giving away little magnets, that didn't do it for me. The giveaways didn't do it. So I would like to keep this chat alive as we think about human capital and people resources, collaborating. Oh my goodness. Is that you, Regina?
Yeah, I'd like to hear.
Was that you, Sherwin, that said I'd like to hear?
Yes, I was saying I'd like to hear from some of the others, colleagues who are on the Zoom to find out if they're having similar experiences, what are their experiences, whether or not they have, as you pointed out, some of the things that they have done that has, that has been helpful in being able to, move groups forward in a positive direction, particularly volunteer groups, or are they facing the same challenges with volunteers that you and I have been facing?
Regina says she's collaborated with another organization with some similarities as Regina's ministries that have programs looking for speakers. Alicia, I see you. Hello. You absolutely can join this dialogue.
Yeah, can you guys hear me? I don't know if my headphones are gonna pick up. Can you guys hear me?
We can now, yes.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm trying to think of volunteers. So what comes to mind when I've had to lead volunteers, obviously it's not paid, is actually when I worked in the church for in an evangelical space about 2 years ago. We had a pretty fruitful congregation. And one way that we were able to, it would get stale at times. Like we would get volunteers, and within our volunteers, they'd get burnout because obviously in New York City, like you're all saying, parents, have tons of things to do. It can just get overwhelmed. But what we found is, again, similar to what you're saying, Cassandra, we would send out like an invitation to see kind of in the areas that we needed the most opportunity. So whether that was working with children, whether that was working in, music, but we would make it seem fun. So like if we were doing something in the music industry and we were looking for volunteers to like work with, singing, we would hold like auditions, right? So we would say, come do something, and it would be like an American Idol kind of like talent thing. And they'd show up, they perform, and it didn't necessarily seem so much catered around like necessarily the word volunteering, but in a sense they were showing up, and it was also in the capacity of something that they enjoyed. And so I think maybe getting a little creative, again, highlighting areas in your spaces that you need, maybe the wording and how you use the wording on top of that, like making it an eventful thing might encourage people to get involved. And then the last thing I would definitely say is always doing things in rotation. Again, people can get burned out. So if, you're giving people a lot of things and a lot of work to do, maybe having like 2 of those people. So if someone's out, if the workload is heavy, they're able to kind of come in and help that other person. But those are just some of the things that I've seen. I would say, I know some of you talked about the school area, but this is specifically in a church space. So, we always like to use those words like serve. That was really big. When new members would come, they wanted to, feel a part of a community. So how do we get them involved? And that was a really great way for them to kind of get plugged in and get to know more people. And then they'd invite their friends, and then it would kind of be a rotation. So just a few things I've seen.
Oh, that's a great way to think about it. Absolutely. Kind of entertainment, creativity, sometimes a little challenging, but I definitely see where folks would kind of begin to build interest, right? They kind of get bought in. That whole idea about talent and and kind of showing your support, right, in an audition, that brings a community together. I totally see that. Anyone
Yeah,
else
no,
out there that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, and I was just gonna say, I think it caters to obviously like the spaces that we're in. So, church, I feel like has often those moments, when I've found like, people want to serve. Like it's, they feel enabled, but you go to some things like I've seen at a homeless shelter where I've volunteered at like the Bowery Mission where I personally go in and I give my time. And it's crazy. It's like corporate events where I see like, you know, a ton of people in there. And I'm like, whoa, like how do people, like even on Thanksgiving, it'll be an array of people that could be spending time with their families. But instead of actually being with their loved ones, they've like dedicated their whole first morning to showing up to serve like the vulnerable populations. So I don't think it's a one thing that fits all. I think some of these things can be tactic and like, again, imagery and how you're positioning, the wording that we're using. So that was big around serving. How can we get you involved with the community? Helping, giving back. And so we can kind of tug at the heart. I think those are another great ways that get people plugged in, that make them feel like, hey, I can give some of my time to give back to others that may be in need.
Regina, did you also put in the chat short-term commitments?
Yes, I did. Thinking
I saw
about
that.
thinking about either school districts or faith-based communities. Think about short-term commitment where people can come in and have some impact and feel good and go forth and tell the story. Seasonal times of the Christian year, Christmas, Easter, Advent, or back to school projects, or for the school board, or some kind of giving campaign, or some kind of school teacher appreciation week, something where you can commit short term with great impact, where the volunteer feels like, okay, well, this is a good idea. I can put it in my schedule. I can feel good about it. And they're probably more likely to return to do it again and again.
I love that idea, kind of chunking out the big work into consumable pieces that folks can feel like that's within my reach. That's a really interesting way to look at it. And I was talking with someone earlier who is leading an event to essentially collect donations, and then those donations have to be sorted, right? To your point. No one really without great effort can volunteer for a whole day of sorting, but could you volunteer an hour, 2 hours, and take it from there? And that's a great way to look at it, kind of chunking out bigger initiatives into smaller consumable pieces. That's great. Anyone else out there that has had some luck in how to find, recruit, solicit volunteers?
I think I was saying some of the success I had in terms of being able to recruit volunteers, I think is kind of particularly like when I was working, particularly in youth ministry, definitely trying to get some parents involved. I kind of had to give them a glimpse of the vision, I would say. And I'll give an example of, there was a kind of a little Halloween or trunk or treat festival rather, within the community, and kind of encouraged and told some parents about it. They didn't quite kind of seem engaged in the idea, but I kind of just took some of my own resources in terms of some of the people that I knew, from people that I knew, and bought some things to kind of decorate a couple trunks. And we went out there along with a couple, and kind of met with some other people in the community who was partnering to host it, and just kind of went out there and created some fun fun times for the kids that were there. It just so happened like a couple of the parents just, winded up showing up. They were in the area, and they kind of saw what was happening in terms of engagement with the kids from, myself, and even just pulling on a couple of people that I knew who were willing to help out. And it gave them a glimpse of seeing, okay, we can actually create this environment in terms of the youth ministry that we want to see for our kids at the church. And I think that kind of helped, being able to give them something to really latch on to see the vision of what it means to see kids, particularly their kids, like really engaged and having fun in some tangible ways.
Marvin, you make a great point about seeing, right?
Right.
Seeing visual, right? Whether it's a photograph or some artifact, some piece of evidence, right? This day and age, it may be an online presence, it may be a TikTok, but it's some kind of memorial that we did this really great thing together, or I did this thing, or Marvin did this thing, or Sherwin did this thing, but giving folks a moment to celebrate, right? That moment of having been recognized that such an accomplishment took place. It may be as simple as showing a picture of what could be done once we get a group of people together in an initiative. And so, as we talk through this, could it be displaying a success story of an organization just like mine? Could it be showing a picture of a previous event that took place in my organization? Maybe that's part of the tactic to get folks together, right? Just to get them interested, like, oh my goodness, you did that thing. We can do that again. Let's try to do it again. Let's try to replicate what was done elsewhere, or replicate what we did here in a previous iteration. Because those kind of tangible moments, especially in kind of the way that society is wired today, right? We want to see the thing before we embark on an effort to get together and do it. I do like Alicia. Alicia, did you have your hand up again? Or was it from before about kind of affinity and emotional connection? Please.
Yeah, I took it down. Sorry, it was just up for a while. Sorry about that, Cassandra.
But someone else said also in the chat, right? The holiday season, a very popular time for volunteerism. Sometimes, right, volunteer fatigue sets in, and we might need to kind of, that's where I think that dialogue of like chunking it up into smaller, more consumable pieces feels really like a strong strategy for success. And we'll talk more about recruiting offline. If you'd like to start that dialogue, glad to. I do see some emails popping in, so glad to continue the conversation there. But I do want to get through these. This is a great conversation, so please feel free to continue raising your hand if something we see on these visuals kind of hits your funny bone. Once we get all of these recruits together, these new members, the new energy, how do we get the team to start moving in the same direction together? Many of us have talked or heard or been through these stages, and they are commonly referred to as the team development stages of forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning, right? Forming, that thing we just spent a whole great dialogue. How do I get all y'all together in the first place? We may not know exactly what we all have in common, but I'm certain we have more in common than we do in our differences. So let's start figuring that out together. That's what we're doing in storming. All of these kind of struggles of, I like this and I favor that, but this is the priority. How do we get through the storming phase to figure out what are we going to settle on? The norming stage, settle into our roles and responsibilities to do the thing that we want to do together. And then we are going to stand up and do the thing that is performing. We know what we want to do. We know where we're headed. We know we're going there together. I'm going to do some things, and Dr. Gabby's going to do some things. Joan is going to do some things, because we're all assuming responsibility and or accepting the delegation, and we're going to do that thing. We are going to be successful. The goal here is to help folks work together so that the performance is greater than the sum of our individual parts. And then on a different occasion, a funny story about adjourning. Adjourning is a very real part of life. Every chapter begins and ends, and it's okay. Projects are a little neater, a little clearer to understand when it's time to adjourn. We've completed that task. We're across the finish line. We did the thing that we promised we were going to do together. We feel great about what we delivered. Sometimes we don't always deliver, but we still need to adjourn anyway. We'll recognize all the contributions, but the initiative comes to an end, and that is part of the life cycle of a team. And the behavioral psychologist, Tuckman in 65 says, groups don't form spontaneously. It's not like the Big Bang. Groups form because there's intent. And so how do we get to doing that? Well, these clearly defined stages help us transition this kind of random, seemingly groups of individuals, of kind of sovereign contributors that don't seem to know each other or have very much in common, but we'll find that kind of singular ambition or focus that this dynamic group can all collaborate on. We'll find some common ground and move them together forward, right? That's the goal, how to move forward together. And I want to offer this. Anyone ever see this before? In a group, maybe it's work. Is the person at kind of the position, the leader or the manager? And as we think through that, you know, there are times that we have to take one role versus another. And in volunteerism and mission-based work, we often find that leadership in faith-based work is what gets us all across the finish line with greater intrinsic value, right? It means more to me when my group of the blue and orange accomplish a task together. And not because I'm a Mets fan, I did not just give that away, right? But when the blue and orange complete something together and achieve a goal, cross the finish line, perform a task through leadership and not through management, it feels so much better. So figure out kind of where we need to be in the manage versus lead, right? And I see, Regina, you too saw it as lead versus manage. I feel that way too sometimes. When we talk about getting folks together, how do we get everyone marching? This group, we've recruited people. They showed up. They want to do the thing with us. Okay. How do we get them to do that? Oh my goodness. What do we do? What's kind of our tool? What's in our toolkit? And so we explore a couple of things. We explore the dialogue about influence and power, right? And power's weird, especially when we are talking about mission-based work, faith-based work, and volunteerism. But when we think about leadership and being in these groups, these are the 9 influence bases that kind of rise up that we consider when getting a team of people, a group of people, folks that have now become members of an organized effort, right? Especially in volunteerism, sometimes that dialogue of direct reports, not so easy if it exists at all. So in a situation where there aren't really, I'm sorry, go ahead. In most teams, when we don't have direct reporting structures, we kind of have to think about who's going to influence who, how do we get work done, how do we kind of figure this all out together. These are the 9 influence bases. We think about authority, sometimes assignment. We think about budget pretty often. Promotion, but not in the notion of Dr. Gabby has been promoted over me, or it is more about promoting the work we're doing together, improving our position, collective position. What else kind of motivates people, right? Money motivates people. In this example, it's pay, but it also could be fundraising. Money motivating people. Sometimes what motivates people, penalty. And so sometimes I had observed in the chat that we talked about volunteerism during the holidays, kind of coming like on Thanksgiving, right? And sometimes people look at that as, I'm going to go because I want to, because it intrinsically feels good to me to do that. I once had a boyfriend who didn't really get that. And I tried to talk about it, but that wasn't going anywhere. And so I volunteered on Thanksgiving anyway. And what ended up happening that I volunteered on Thanksgiving, and everyone that we were supposed to have dinner with went to volunteer. And there was my boyfriend. Of all the people that we were having Thanksgiving dinner with, everybody went to volunteer. And he was like, no, I don't think I'm going to go. So not really a penalty, but a consequence, right? Not really a punishment, but a circumstance, is that we all went and he was sitting there by himself. And eventually he was like, oh, well, this doesn't feel good. I'm just going to go with all y'all. And a consequence, right? So he does this thing and we get him to do the thing because he doesn't want the consequence. Sometimes folks do things for the challenge, whether it's a work challenge, but essentially it's for their enjoyment. It's because they get something intrinsic out of it. Sometimes folks do a thing because of an expertise level. Either they have it and they want to share it, or they want to build it. How can I build? So in dialoguing about experience, right? Getting folks to volunteer. Sometimes at the Administrative Management Council, we say, do you not yet have a skill? Or do you want to elevate a skill? What is that skill? And let's give you an opportunity to have some applied learning so you can build the skill, right? That dialogue about authority and about expertise. And then of course, who doesn't do a favor for a friend? That's always an influence base, right? I'm going to do it for a friend. In leading and managing, we also think about power, and not power in kind of like overt strength, but power as in the ability to influence behavior. And of the 5 common power bases, some of them are extremely altruistic in nature. And others of them have been used the wrong way, right? So I need not kind of say which ones are which, but we hope that expertise and knowledge, reward and recognition really bubble up to the surface about how we can encourage others to jump in and join the effort, right? That power, the power to make this team, make this effort get this project finished, accomplish this goal, deliver this unique thing that we're building together. And so we got to balance, right? We got to balance. I need to ensure that I'm having an impact. And how do I ensure I'm having an impact? What's the power I'm exercising to deliver that impact? And that all goes back to lead versus manage. How do we manage and lead? And so I think this kind of tickles that topic we talked about again. What motivates people? In a volunteer space, what's motivating people to do the thing, to care enough to do the thing? Maybe it's intrinsic. Maybe they want to participate because of a level of enjoyment, right? That's pure and it's just about them. Maybe it's extrinsic. Sorry. Foot in my mouth. Extrinsic for reward. Now, to that point, right? Maybe it's not reward like a thing, like when you play skee ball and you get all the tickets and you go claim your tickets for a stuffed animal. It might be recognition. It might be that point where you get some recognition for the thing that you've done, that contribution that you've made. Maybe we all celebrated together. Maybe we ended up being mentioned on a website, recognized in a speech, spoken about, not necessarily by name, but to know that we inspired someone else. And so those are some of the things that we find motivate folks. What if okay, so yes.
Yeah, Cassandra, I was just thinking, it's like, I'm going to use the church context for a moment, okay? A person goes to church and they hear a really good sermon and they get very excited about it.
Okay.
And they join church, right? Or they join an organization because of I'll use the word, they got caught up in the excitement of the moment. And yet, when it's time for them to show up, I'll use this term, for the new members classes, or for the meetings that follow, that allows you to go to the next level to achieve the goal or objective. They lack that ability of follow through to be able to, continue the process to get to, again, the conclusion that you talked about earlier. And I think, to me, that's some of the challenges that, getting people to engage in that follow through beyond just the momentary excitement, so that the work can actually get done, because that's where the work really needs to happen.
I hear you. And I am going to borrow that great idea from someone else about how do we begin making smaller consumable parts. I don't know the answer to that in every body of work, but what I have discovered in my own experiences with volunteers, the more finite that I can make a commitment, the more folks raise their hand to say, I would do it. And I'll give you a good example. I have committees at the Administrative Management Council. They are all focused on some content. Here's a straightforward one. We have a community service committee. They are responsible to run community supporting engagement across the campuses to benefit a not-for-profit organization. They run, on average, one charitable event a month, every month, for 10 out of the 12 months of the year. And the old model was the chair and the vice chair of this committee ran every single drive. 10 to 11 a year. That is just a huge lift. But I said, let's think about this. could you, chair and vice chair, be the grand orchestrators and get folks that will run one drive? Sherwin runs a drive, Mimi runs one drive, Cassandra runs one drive, and so on and so forth. And she said to me, let's try that. Everyone gets to kind of orchestrate for close time, right? And she ended up getting more active members, which meant they kept coming and coming and coming because they weren't committed to this really long haul of work. And so that's what made her recipe. Those are the ingredients for the recipe for her success. Can that work in the structure that you are in right now? Can that get chunked out into something that's with a shorter horizon? Something to think about, not to solve for today, right? It may be kind of really thinking like mind blown, like, okay, let's really see how this could work. And I'm not saying that I have all the solutions. I'm just saying, let's ask the hard questions. Could we begin to chunk that out? Something to think about, but glad to continue the conversation, because if what we say is folks do things for these two reasons, essentially, either because they enjoy it or because they want some some reward or recognition, to your point, they don't always have the longevity, the bandwidth to be here for the long haul. How do I find that sweet spot? And so let's kind of explore that as we continue on, and maybe we'll find some other success stories from others. If you do have a success story to offer here, please go ahead, either raise your hand or identify yourself in the chat. We would love to hear about your successes. And they may be fantastic. The passion and the time, Regina, I hear that, right? It's not just that they care about the thing, but do they care about the thing enough to carve out space and time to do that? That's a toughie. That's a toughie. That task of labor that Regina's in, we were in a very similar task in my public education life where I volunteer. We had to put together like goodie bags, but like thousands of them, which is just, you know, a mundane task, but it takes hours. And we had a potluck that ran over like 6 hours. We chunked it into, you know, a breakfast and a lunch shift. Bring some things, hang out a bit, talk some stories, stuff some bags. I will tell you though, Sherwin, we had 45 people show up for the morning shift and 45 people sign up and only like 20 something showed up. But even if those 20 people were there for 3 hours eating donuts and drinking coffee together, just, you know, shooting the nonsense, even if each of those 26 people loaded 100 bags in 3 hours, that's 2,600 bags that I didn't have that morning, but I had them by lunch. See how it goes, right?
Right. Good point.
So kind of thinking about it, right? Like thinking about, why do people do what they do? How do we get them, to your point, interested, and then keep them interested so that they carve out some time so that they can show that effort? Who was that? Right? Managing and leading people, same conversation there. And I want to offer the following that you'll hear about. And these are needs theories. We know about Maslow, right? The hierarchy of needs. People make choices driven by qualities of human behavior. Sometimes we'll hear about Hertzberg, motivation and hygiene, kind of motivational factors are about satisfaction. Hygiene factors, dissatisfaction. You may have heard about McClellan's acquired needs theory in the lower right-hand corner. Needs that we learn over time that really are influenced by the experiences we accumulate. The experiences of achieving a thing, the experiences of being connected or affiliated with a thing, the experience of power, the ability to influence what happens next. And then something like really complex is this McGregor's theories of X's and Y's. And when we hear that concept, like, well, X's and Y's, not just chromosomes. So I just kind of want to throw that in there. Like, this is how it comes about, and a little bit of the origin. I find, though, that most often we lean on, especially in volunteer, faith-based, and mission-based work. I've seen more about the acquired needs theory, right? Needs that are built over time and experience, and Hertzberg's theories of motivation and hygiene. What will satisfy me? Motivation. What will bring me dissatisfaction? Hygiene. And so, to that point about stuffing those bags, stuffing bags does not bring me any kind of satisfaction. But what brings me satisfaction is being connected to people. And so, potluck breakfast, everyone brings a thing, stuff some bags, and maybe we're checking a couple boxes here and there. Bye, Alicia. And so that may be a place where those two things can meet. Some of the things that we talked about in chat was about conflict. And I wanted to offer you this matrix, for lack of a better kind of phrase, right? We're not going to go through it. I think it's self-explanatory as we kind of engage with teams and even just groups of people that are brought together. Conflict happens because people just don't see eye to eye. They don't have the same experiences or expectations or resources, right? And so how do we go ahead and get through it? You do not get around it. You've got to get through it. You get through having differences through elegant confrontation, with the notion that compromise is going to be part of that path. We're going to smooth because we're going to find greater agreement and commonalities. Then we have differences. Forcing the win-lose approach, right? That's kind of like somebody wins, somebody loses. There's no such thing as a net-sum game. That's a tough one. You know, I don't really, it is sometimes inevitable, but I do find that if we can define our commonalities, that win-lose approach loses its significance. Ultimately, someone is going to feel like they've withdrawn, because that's essentially what compromise is, right? Compromise is everyone withdraws a little bit. Essentially, what I find is the greatest success is the collaboration, but they all live somewhere on this matrix. So this is something for you to kind of percolate over in your days to come. Like, where do I land in a circumstance right now on this matrix? And then dysfunction's a tough word, but here's some of the advice that I've gotten from others, right? Because I see this type of misalignment, and I'm like, where did that come from? Sometimes it just comes from an absence of trust, not because we're not trustworthy people. We just might not know enough about each other or have enough experiences with each other yet. Sometimes we have dysfunction or lack of alignment from a fear of conflict, right? Sometimes a lack of commitment, and that's very common, right, in faith-based volunteerism and mission-based work. Sometimes we find folks that, you know, get excited at the beginning and they go, oh, there's a level of accountability here and commitment. I gotta figure out how that aligns with what I want to do. And so that kind of throws a little monkey wrench into things. And we hope sometime we recognize sometimes that we could not get across the finish line because we've got to figure out how to redirect and have attention to the results and the details. And some of the best practices that we've kind of thumb wrestled with in my organization, at least, especially in our mission-based work, is patience, kindness, grace. That's a tough one, especially in our more heated dialogues. That number 2, don't blame people. That is a skill I am practicing every day. It is not Cassandra's fault that a thing didn't occur. It is this thing didn't occur. Full stop.
But what if it is Cassandra's fault that the thing didn't occur?
I don't disagree. Identifying Cassandra as the primary agent, toughie, right? Because like deep down we know she screwed up. She screwed up.
Because can I say this, Cassandra? In my professional endeavors where I get paid, right? And I have a staff meeting with my staff. If I bring up an issue that is controversial or problematic, one of my team will inherently say to me, Mr. James, I'm not sure I understand why you're addressing the team. Is there someone in particular that really you should be addressing? Because I'm not sure I understand why you're talking to the team about this, because none of us have had this issue. And it puts the person on the spot because there is someone. But of course, we don't want to point that person out. And so we're trying to, again, not blame people, but it causes people who are not the ones who are creating the problem to feel like, why are you telling me about that? That's not something that I'm aware of, that I have anything to do with.
I hear you. And so what I have done historically is I elevate the issue with the person so that we can experience their context, right? Sometimes feels like excuses, sometimes feels like reasons, but it's the context, right? They made some decisions in some context of conditions. What are those contexts? But then when we kind of bring the team together to discuss it, we co-present that issue all the time. It's a practice that I engaged in a long time ago, and I always give them the lessons learned part. If they don't volunteer to take that section, that's you, boo. Tap, tap. Here's the baton. You're going to run with it. And it's not a penalty. It is a learning exercise. They will never make that mistake again. Never. But it really does start dialogue, right? There's a level of humble is actually the path to greatest learning. And I do want to be respectful of time. So these are some of our best practices as we've engaged in teams with some success and some struggle. But it really is kind of greater than the sum of our parts, finding folks that believe in something really similar, but allowing them to refine those similarities. Because in the end, we're using these concepts everywhere, at work, at home, working from home, when we volunteer, in our faith-based organizations, in our mission-driven work. And so they're everywhere. And so when we think about that, there are some conversations that have sparked from here. I'm so grateful to have been in space with you. If you do need anything, or we can dialogue further about what we talked about together today, feel free to reach me. cal10@nyu.edu. I am going to stop talking now and just offer thanks and appreciation. Feel free to connect with me anytime. Dr. Gabby.
Everyone, can we just offer gratitude in the chat or through emoticons for Cassandra? We have literally had the pleasure of sitting in her classroom this evening. Thank you, Cassandra, for that wealth of information, that actionable and relevant information that I know so many of us are grateful for. And thank you for all of you, because by your jumping in and being interactive with us, we've been able to have the kind of conversation that means that we got to speak directly into some of the experiences that you all are navigating right now. So we are finished for the evening. This will be available on YouTube, Union Theological Seminary's YouTube page, and look for our Title Speaker Series playlist. And this should be up within the next 2 days so that you can go back through and experience this. And if you registered to be here, which I believe you all did, then you will also be able to get access to some of the content that Cassandra shared today. We will make sure that you have access to that as well. So thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful evening, and let's get to work.
Have a great day, everyone. Good night.
Bye.